Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, your slow TV English class from the Meeting Point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. And in today's podcast we are talking intelligence. We have some quotes of the week, a thought for the day, some pronunciation problems, suffix of the week, and also some amazing facts, plus some other things if we have time. But first, we have this. We like to think that we are clever, but we are not so intelligent really. Even though we go around with these smartphones in our hands, we have no idea how they work, and certainly couldn't make one. Few of us would know where to start if we were asked to make a pencil. The Earth goes round the Sun. We all know that. But do we? How do we know? In times past, they thought the Sun went around the Earth. How foolish they were. Yet we would have thought the same if we were around all those years ago. We only know because somebody told us. We are living in an enlightened world. This is the great advantage of having language and writing. We can pass on our knowledge to others. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every generation. We can pick up the research from where the last person left off. Individually, we may be quite ignorant, but as long as some people are intelligent, we all gain. Do we all have the same capacity for intelligence? People often marry others of similar occupations and interests. Artistic people are often attracted to other artists, and scientists tend towards others of a scientific leaning. So it's not surprising that we have a certain amount of inherited ability, in the same way that we inherit our height or our hair colour. The home environment will also add to these advantages. The notion of multiple intelligences expands the definition to include our competence in interacting with others, painting pictures, and playing sports, qualities that were previously called skills or abilities. Unfortunately, this broader understanding is not reflected in our education system, where the primary method of assessment is based on memory and our ability to recall facts on a given day, a quality that goes unmentioned in the list of multiple intelligences. As with memory, our ability to learn is largely governed by our interest in a subject. Some people seem to have a huge capacity for the Latin names of plants or the dates of historic battles. Others know huge amounts about car engines or the world of sport. Unfortunately, our cultural hierarchy decrees that being able to name all the characters in a Shakespeare play is held in higher esteem than the ability to name the players in a cup-winning team. Will artificial intelligence mean that we become so lazy that we stop using our brains? It seems unlikely. New technology does not necessarily eliminate the old. The theatre survived the advent of the cinema, which in turn survived the invention of television. The radio did not put a stop to our need to make our own music, any more than the invention of photography supplanted our need to create works of art. The popularity of Sudokus, Wordles, crosswords, whodunits, pub quizzes, and escape rooms testifies to our innate need to exercise our minds. Of course, there will always be some cognitive couch potatoes, in the same way that labour-saving devices make some people physically inactive, but many will find their mental workout as necessary as going to the gymnasium. We like to think. And here are this week's quotations on the topic of intelligence. The first one is from Eleanor Roosevelt. I think we've seen this one a few times before, but it's always good to see it again. Small minds discuss people. Average minds discuss events. Great minds discuss ideas. I think we could use this as the slogan for the meeting point, because I think we cover all of these types of discussion, really. Sometimes we're very serious and philosophical, and sometimes we just like telling amusing anecdotes about people we've met. Our second quotation comes from Stephen Hawking. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. For those of you that have been looking in your book, there was an article in there about the Dunning-Kruger effect, which states that those people who have a little bit of knowledge about something often overestimate how much they know. Whereas the more you study something, the more you realise how little you know. So this quotation has appeared in many different forms. They also say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And of course there were other quotations that we looked at last week under opinion about the fool thinks he is a wise man, but the wise man knows he is a fool, and all those kind of quotations. So there are many on the same theme, or very similar themes. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. Yes. The last one I like a lot. It's possibly Albert Einstein, but nobody's really sure, but it's often attributed to Albert Einstein. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. It's a very profound statement, this one, because I think a lot of people are, let's say, not suited to the education system, where maybe they are intelligent, but it just doesn't have chance to show in the way we judge intelligence. Isn't always suitable for everybody. And there are many people who could be intelligent but don't really get the opportunity because of the structure of our society and how we judge intelligence. So, interesting quotations on the topic of intelligence. And now, here's something I thought about recently. So we were discussing in class the importance of literacy and how in the past a great many people were illiterate, unable to read or write. But that doesn't mean that they were any less intelligent. And we presume that there must have been a great many intelligent people around before writing was even invented. Which led us to the conclusion that writing was invented by an illiterate person. Now there's an interesting thought. Okay, so let's move on to some pronunciation problems. Now last week we were looking at the difference between the y sound and the j sound. Remember we were talking about juice and use. And I said I would come back to the ch and j difference. We had 3 words at the end. We were looking at joke, yoke, and choke, if you remember rightly. And I'd said I'd come back to talk about the joke-choke problem. So the way to look at these two is one of them is voiced and one of them is unvoiced. Now, if you go back several episodes, we were talking about the s and the z sounds. And the difference is that the second one is called a voiced consonant. So the first one, s, that noise is made in my mouth. There is nothing happening in my throat. Whereas if I do the same thing but add a vibration in my throat, I get a sound that goes zzz, and that is called a voiced consonant. Now the same thing is happening here. We have a pair of sounds. The unvoiced one is ch, ch, ch. The voiced one is j, j, j. See, that second one is much further down in my throat. There is more vibration happening in my vocal cords. So if we take the word choke, choke, followed by joke, joke, choke, joke. The second one has the voice added to it. They're very similar. The first one is only happening in my mouth, the ch sound. Choke, joke. Here's another pair, chill and jill. Chill is to make something cold, or it can be to relax in the modern world. Chill out, man. So there's chill, and then there's the girl's name, Jill. Jill. Then we have cherry, cherry, and Jerry. Jerry. Cherry is a fruit. Jerry is a boy's name. Then we have cheddar, cheddar, which is a place in England where the cheese originated, and Jeddah, which is it in Saudi Arabia? Jeddah. There was a Grand Prix last week in the Formula One, and it was from Jeddah. I was confused. I thought it was from cheddar. Imagine my confusion. Okay, so those have it at the beginning, the ch and the j. And then I was looking for some where we have it at the end. So you've got batch and badge, batch, badge. You might notice that the A is a little bit longer. When I'm doing the voiced sound in the second one, badge, the A does stretch out a little bit as it goes into the voiced consonant, whereas batch, the A seems to be a little bit shorter. And then we can have rich and ridge. Ridge. Rich is the first one, ridge is the second one. Then we can take these words, church, got one at the beginning and the end, and judge. The vowel sound in the middle is a bit different. It's longer in the first one because of the R. But listen to the consonant sounds at the beginning and end. Church, judge, judge. Okay, so that's our pronunciation problem for this week. So this week we've got an interesting suffix for you. It's ish, ish, I-S-H, ish. And it means something like, similar to, approximately, more or less, something like that. So there are some things that you've probably seen before, adjectives like foolish, if someone who behaves like a fool, or selfish, someone who always thinks of themselves. A childish person is someone who behaves like a child, but it's normally in a very negative sort of way. So that's describing something which is similar to something. You also can use it when you're talking about colours. You hear words like bluish, which means kind of like a blue. It's a kind of blue, but very like really not very specific. It's kind of similar to a blue. Or you can use it in mixtures of colours, like it's a greenish yellow. It's not green and it's not yellow, it's sort of somewhere in between, a greenish yellow. You can use it for ages. If you're describing someone, you can say, oh, he's about 30-ish, meaning he's approximately 30. He could be in his late 20s, early 30s, but around about 30. He's about 30-ish. You can use it for the time as well. You might say, shall we meet at 7-ish? Meaning approximately 7, more or less, something like 7, 7-ish. You could use it to describe someone as tallish. You could say, well, he's kind of tallish, meaning he's tall, but not very tall, quite tall. He's tallish. And there's another interesting adjective, which is sluggish, which means slow, but it actually means like a slug. Sluggish. It's a very good word. A slug is one of these creatures. It's a very strange thing. It's a bit like a snail, but it doesn't have a shell on it. Which reminds me of a joke. What did the slug say to the snail? Spare change? This spare change phrase is a very typical phrase for homeless people when they're asking for money in the street. And of course, the slug is homeless because the snail has a house, you see. That's why it's funny. Yes, hilarious. I think you'll agree. Now it's time for an amazing fact. We were discussing on Wednesday this week, I don't know why we were discussing it really, we were discussing going across Siberia on the Trans-Siberian Railway. And we were discussing how sparsely populated some parts of Russia are. Now, here's the interesting fact. Bangladesh has a lot more people than Russia. So the population of Russia is 143 million people. And the population of Bangladesh is 172 million people. So a lot more people in Bangladesh than in the whole of Russia. Now I've got this map here that shows you how you can superimpose the real size of countries on top of each other because they tend to get distorted on maps. But you can see how small Bangladesh is compared to Russia. Russia has 8.4 people per square kilometre, 8.4 people, whereas Bangladesh has 1,165 people per square kilometre. Now that is an interesting fact. The other interesting fact about the Trans-Siberian Railway, we were discussing, as I said, this long train journey and how you can go for long periods of time between stops. And I was looking for the longest distance between two railway stations. And on the Trans-Siberian Railway, between a station called Teshet and another one called Zima, there is approximately 250 kilometers of railway without a station. 250 kilometers between stations, which you would think that must be a record. But no, the longest non-stop train segment is on a route between Sydney and Perth in Australia. There is a section that goes across the Nullarbor Plain, which is approximately 478 kilometres without a stop. That's 478 kilometres between two stations. Not only that, but it's in a straight line. It doesn't even go round corners. It's renowned for being the longest straight section of railway track in the world. An uninterrupted journey through Australia's vast outback, it says here, for 478 kilometres in a straight line across a desert. Now that is quite impressive. That is an amazing fact. And finally, here is the news. I expect you wanted to know what happened to that dinosaur egg we were trying to hatch last week. Well, here it is. And what a ferocious beast it turned out to be, I think you'll agree. In other news, we'll have some more Friday specials coming up this trimester. Of course, towards the end of the term, we'll have our usual beer and cheese event where we will sit around talking about whatever comes to mind. But we'll also have some kind of reading event coming up. Now, we've got a few options. The play that we did a short while ago was quite successful, so we thought we'd have a look at other plays. So we've got a couple of options that we could do. One of them is Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, or we could do The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. So let me know if you have any preferences for either of those. There's also a short reading which I might print out and leave on the table in the office. There's about 4 pages. It's called Desiree's Baby, and which is by Kate Chopin. So I'll leave some copies of that around, and if anyone's interested in reading that, we'll have a meeting on that topic. There's also the possibility of having a quiz night, because last week when we were discussing intelligence, one of the things that came up in the conversation was having quiz nights in pubs. It's a very common thing in Britain and Ireland and places in America as well, I believe. And somebody said, why don't we have a quiz night in the meeting point? So I thought that's a fantastic idea. So if anyone's interested in drinking beer and answering questions on trivia, let me know and we'll organise an evening. Someone recently asked if they were allowed to share the podcast with a friend. And I say, yes, of course you are. The more people that see it, the better. Share it with all your friends and all your family. Share it with your workmates and neighbours. Share it with all your contacts. Share it not only in Bilbao, but throughout the world. Have a good week. Till next week.